we have a long way to go in the event industry, and I think there's going to be a few victims of COVID within our industry, just as there is throughout hospitality. So let's just watch this space and see what the future holds.
No one would dispute that COVID has been the biggest challenge that's ever faced our hospitality industry. But those who've been in the industry for decades have weathered many storms. I wanted to get the perspective of someone who's run different types of food businesses and who has wide and deep experience across cuisines, locations and venue types. Adam Sadiqzai owns Khan Hospitality Services, which runs a number of venues in Victoria. He's recently opened Stella's Kitchen on the edge of Melbourne at Montague Apple Farm. In the early 1960s, his parents opened what was probably the first Indian restaurant in Australia. There is a lot to talk about. Adam, welcome.
Hi, Dani. Thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure to have you on the show, and I'm really keen to get your perspective. It's a funny week because this is the week that, if we look back a year ago, everything was shutting down. Tell us what the year's been like for you.
Well, needless to say, it's been a roller coaster, one both at a business level and another one at a personal and emotional level. I think anyone in our industry has had a lot to deal with this year, but I say to people that my analogy is we've been living with like we're playing Russian roulette, with one bullet in the barrel. And you just don't know what the next move's going to be, depending on what the government decides on the day. So it's been a roller coaster, but we've done okay.
So tell us about your portfolio at the moment. What are you guys up to at Khan's?
Well, we currently operate Stella's Kitchen, which is at the Montague Orchard in Listerfield, which has been a great addition to what we do, and that's modern Australian cuisine. We also have venues in Pakenham and Warragul, which are primarily function venues, and they do events for anything from 500 to the 10 to 20,000 people. So there are two venues in Warragul and one in Pakenham. Pakenham has a cafe attached to it as well, which is by a lake and does quite well.
Yeah, funny that you mention events. Well, not funny, but I think as we're recording this, there is a march on the steps of Parliament House in Victoria by people in the events industry asking for consideration, wondering why there can be 50,000 people at the MCG, but it's still, it's still quite difficult to run an event. I mean, events obviously hit super hard. What's it been like for you?
Oh, absolutely. That's what's actually caused us the most stress, the inability to hold events, conduct events, even take bookings was so hard. That's slowly changing now, but I remember this time last year we were gearing up for Farm World, which is a major event, has 40,000 people over 3 days at Lardner Park, and we had just purchased stock for that event. Well, quite a lot of it, and only to be told a few days prior, we can't. The event will not go ahead. So here we are this year, and we're excited that the event's happening again. But as I say, you just don't know what could happen tomorrow. That's the emotional turmoil that we go through. But I think the event industry is slowly opening up. Talking to other industry people, my brothers that are in the industry, they're slowly getting bookings again. Smaller bookings, though, not large events. That's not happening. But at least it's allowing the wheels to turn in their business, and they're getting a sense of positivity, which is helping them immensely. But we have a long way to go in the event industry, and I think there's going to be a few victims of COVID within our industry, just as there is throughout hospitality. So let's just watch this space and see what the future holds.
It's your events, accommodation, tourism and some hospitality operators have asked for the government to continue supports such as JobKeeper because those industries are unable to trade as normal. It's just a very different landscape to it was a year ago. What's your view on that?
Oh, look, I can definitely see a need within the tourism industry and perhaps the event side of our industry. Restaurants are able to open and get back to business. JobKeeper was very important in the early days, and right up till now has been a big part of our survival. But that being said, moving forward, in a way, it's a noose around our neck as well, for a number of reasons. And as all our industry are talking at the moment about the inability to find staff because of those that are on JobKeeper, that is primarily one of our biggest problems at the moment. And from a personal level, I just think a lot of our industry has been operating on a false economy because of JobKeeper. So we need to get on with it.
Tell me more about that. Where do you think the falsities lie?
Well, look, I mean, suffice to say, there would have been a large number of our industry that actually did quite well with JobKeeper, but the ones that are bigger and busier, paid a price. JobKeeper really, just sustained the staff, but their business models weren't sustainable. I know of a few industry people that literally closed doors because of JobKeeper with the intentions of reopening, but they became irrelevant in our industry, which concerned me a lot because my view was stay open, and even if you sold a coffee, you sold a coffee. JobKeeper was a bonus, but a lot of our industry decided to just enjoy the benefits of JobKeeper, which is fine. It was a hard time, but we need to get on with it and face the true realities of our profit and loss and so on.
Right. I mean, I guess people are talking about these so-called zombie businesses that they're only propped up by the government support, and it's not a sustainable business when that's taken away. Are these the kind of businesses that you're talking about? These ones that can't stand on their own 2 feet?
Absolutely. Look, I saw this in the 80s when we had the recession we had to have. And they introduced new laws, FBT, so lunches were no longer tax deductible and so on. The restaurant industry went through an absolute hiding at that time. And what it did was the stronger people in the hospitality industry survived and the less strong crumbled. So there was at that time a bit of a cleaning up of our industry. And I remember the days of Chapel Street where even to enter a shop at that period, you paid key money. People were keen to open up food businesses there. And then along came the 80s and they were all shut down. They were all pretty much destroyed, except for the handful of the long-term players. They survived, and those that had on an economic level put themselves on good footing to deal with that, or took immediate action too as well. So this time it's a little bit different.
So can you draw any other parallels between the recession that we had to have, or the end of Fringe Benefits Tax, any of those? Can you draw any other parallels between other crises that you've seen in the industry and this one?
Look, the one thing about our industry is that we move. We're a very fluid industry, and really it could take a federal election, and we know that impacts our business when elections happen. Weather can impact us. If we have, unseasonal poor weather, it impacts us. So, there are many, many different variations in our industry, but I suppose more recently, in sort of the new players of our industry would have experienced the global economy crash, 4 or 5 years ago? That impacted us to a level as well. There was a level of uncertainty. So people spent less, went out less. But, I can't think of any other moments in recent history that had greater effects on our industry than the recession we had to have and COVID.
They're the big ones, aren't they? Do you feel like you've had there are lessons that you learnt in the 80s that you're still carrying with you today?
Oh, absolutely. When this happened, I locked down within the first day. started looking at ways to redevelop our business and renew our business. What we did in the 80s, we did the opposite to what everyone did. We actually invested in our business. We renovated our business. We knew at some point it had to become good. And mind you, we've been in the game since the 60s. So we're talking, like 80s at the time. So we had, we'd seen the industry had changed, over a good 20-year period. And probably that 70s and 80s was the greatest change our industry ever saw. So we were able to adapt fairly rapidly. We managed to keep all our staff on because we geared up for it. But also, I always think that, hospitality people need a financial buffer to deal with such situations. One thing we know in our experience is it could happen, and it will happen again. It'll be for some other reason, but it'll happen in our industry again. Hopefully not to the extent COVID has hit us. But when there's global crashes or economic influences on our industry, it's a matter of time before you do get better. The hard-hitting thing about COVID, none of us really knew what was going on. And government, especially our state government, didn't do a lot to inform us or let us know what their next step was. And as I say, that's that bullet in the barrel. You could wake up in the morning and find there's 2 cases and they decide, shut your doors like they did pre-Valentine's Day. It could happen. And that's the frightening thing about this time. But nonetheless, given our experience, we've positioned ourselves to even deal with that if that should occur.
I mean, so many hospitality businesses, I guess, small businesses, people get very buried in their businesses and they really, margins are tight and they find it very difficult to create those financial buffers. What are some things, from your experience that you can share that have allowed you to do that? Or what's the mindset that you take to work each day that helps you prioritise that buffer?
It's a tough question. How do you prioritise that buffer? The one thing I do say about our industry is that the most consistent thing about our industry is the inconsistencies. There's nothing consistent about our business, and you can bank on that. And that goes as far as saying, today we served X amount of people, but the next day you serve different personalities, different people, different staff. It's a very dynamic, moving industry. And that's the same to be said about the conditions in which we're working. One, we're very competitive. We've become an incredibly competitive industry. The days of the 80s where everybody knew each other well and helped each other wherever possible, it's not the same today. It's a very competitive, brutal industry, which is a shame in some respect. But to answer your question, yes, it's a tough game, and yes, we all struggle to get those margins, up, our labour costs down, but that's all we can do. Some of the things we can control when we set up these businesses is not, don't go onto high rental locations. Understand your demographics and the need of those demographics in the environment you're in. It's just so important. For us, this meant survival for us. So things changed. We had to change our menus. We had to change our mindset to cater for that change in our demographics needs. But yes, I know it's a tough thing to say, have a financial buffer in our game, because we are all working in our industry, and for many of our industry people, it's hand to mouth. So it's a tough question to answer, Dani. Some of us are more fortunate than others in the game, but we all have that passion and the hope that we can claw ourselves out of that position of weakness and grow into a bigger and stronger business.
Well, one thing that you did do through 2020 was continue to develop Stella's Kitchen at the Montague Orchards, and I think that's a really interesting business in that it it does. It's a business that has these different income streams or these different reasons for people to attend. So there's an apple picking experience. There's a farm gate store there. It's right next door to a national park where people can go cycling or horse riding. Is that sort of multiple draw type of venue where you think, you can sort of create those buffers where there's more than one reason for people to visit a place?
Absolutely. And that was something we discussed and debated many times over where to place our menu and how best we cater for the different demographics of people using a park next door that wants hot chips and a panini, to those dining in that wants a well-made chef's meal. So it was a challenge for us, but I also knew that would position us more widely to a very diverse demographics, but also put us in a position to deal with the current conditions that we're all working in. It's up to us how we manage that, properly. We know our Saturdays and Sundays are busy, so we're keen to get people to book that will sit down and have, 2 courses for lunch or 3 courses or a bottle of wine, and we get a better spend. So we'll manage our business accordingly, as opposed to the week where you have families, park users and so on that are going for walks that just, want that coffee or scones. We manage that very tightly because at the end of the day, we need to get a certain level of income to, one, pay off the investment and hopefully return some money and keep our staff employed. But I think that's one of the key elements of our business, is our industry understanding the need to be able to cater for a wider section than we used to.
But it's hard to get those messages across to customers that, no, this isn't the time for you to just have a scone and a cup of tea. This is the time for you to settle in and spend more. Like, how do you send those signals to customers?
Well, I hope they're not listening, but because I'll tell you the secrets. We ask them at the door, "Are you here for a coffee and a snack, or would you like to?" Particularly because we get a lot of bookings and then we get a lot of walk-ins. So the walk-ins we can manage. The bookings are harder. We can't ask that question, obviously, over the phone, but it's most certainly with the walk-ins, we ask that question. And from there we determine whether we have a table available or not, because we'd rather use that table for a higher yield client, to be blunt. And we also have an outdoor area which we suggest that they go to the outdoor serving and enjoy the dining facilities in the takeaway section. But one of the key elements of any food industry is trying to get your highest average spend. And we can't have the place full of people having a cup of coffee. There's no money in that.
Yeah.
So,
it's a really interesting one because, I guess you sort of hope that people have become a little bit more understanding of the difficult conditions that hospitality businesses operate under. But then again, it is hospitality and, you're always trying to say yes to your customers. So I guess you hope that they read the signals or meet you halfway, or...
They don't. I haven't found any real let up on that front. I think customers' expectations are pretty much the same as pre-COVID. During COVID, it was different. People were very accepting and forgiving and understanding, which was wonderful. But I think, people that weren't into the industry, that were locked up at home, rightly say, we want to go out and enjoy our afternoon. And it's incumbent on us to provide the best we can. But we have to look after our own needs and as well along the way. And I don't know whether people are as understanding as we'd like them to be when it comes to that. We had this discussion only last week with group bookings. They take up a lot of space, and we need the space because we need to turn over tables and so on. and we've decided just to bring in set menus for anything over 12 people, so that we can commit them to spending a certain dollar. Otherwise, we can use those tables better. Better, for our financial gain, and better for the customer too, mind you. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. Adam, I'd love you to talk about staff. I mean, you mentioned that it's hard to find staff. Everybody's saying that, but I know that you do have, you do really value your staff, and you've got a lot of sort of, mentoring type programs. Can you talk about your approach to staffing? Absolutely.
Look, management owners are only as good as their staff. It's as simple as that. I'm grateful to all my staff for every day they come in. So within our business, we have for many years, we've employed people of diversity. We've employed people of through the disability services and so on. So I'm really proud of that, and I'm proud that my staff embrace that. And look after those that are in need within our staff. So that's a big part of what we do. We also encourage people new to the industry to come. I don't think that our industry is doing enough on that front. We should be encouraging new, inexperienced people into our game, and we need to invest time in them to train them. We've been so lucky. We've got some beautiful kids that started with us, and they're the best hospitality people I've ever seen. They've learned, they've taken it in. They don't come in with bad habits. They've got fresh ideas. It's fresh eyes, and it's an absolute treat. We as an industry need to do more on that front, I believe, because there's great people out there. It's hard now to find long-term industry players. It's not what it used to be again. In the 80s and 90s, where people chose our industry as a career. As we all know, we're a very transient industry. We have people come and go, and we need to curtail that one way or another. So my way to approach that is to pay them better, which I know is a bit of pill to pay for a lot of restaurateurs, because, as you say, we're struggling on those margins. But, I find I've managed to keep a very strong and stable staff doing that, and they're for 10 plus years. During COVID, they stuck by my side because I stick by theirs. And they love the opportunity, my older staff, to train up these young people. It's pretty much like a family. I make it a point to visit as many sites as I can in a day, and to speak to each staff member individually. How are you? How are your family? How it's going? To give them that sense of ownership and belonging. Look, it's a tough gig, and front of house is tough, kitchen's tough. There's no real easy part of our industry. So I think as an industry, we've just got to be a little more nurturing to the people that work within it.
I mean, you have basically grown up in the industry and do have a great deal of perspective on how things have changed. I mean, you've mentioned that there was a lot more, I guess, collegial feeling in your early days, and that now it's a little bit more brutal and competitive. But I think to a large degree, I mean, that's got to be a lot just to do with the scale of the industry. There are just so many, Melbourne, Victoria, I mean, all our cities are so much bigger than they were, and there are just so many more restaurants, like in just like straight terms, but also so many more per capita.
Oh, absolutely, and no doubt. But I would say that we're almost oversupplied. I look at some areas and I think, God, how can all these restaurants survive in such a small strip? And I just think those people do it to themselves. But yes, the dynamics have changed, most certainly changed. There are many good things that have come out of these changes, but equally I think there are a lot of bad things that have come out of it.
Well, I think that most people, I think, would agree with you that there has been an oversupply of restaurants, and that some some type of correction was on the way regardless of COVID. Do you think that, with these zombie businesses that we've talked about and the end of many streams of government support, that there's going to be an avalanche of closures?
I honestly believe that. I've been saying that for 6 months, 7 months. I believe that our industry is not out of the woods. I think when JobKeeper finishes and that stream of money finishes, and some of those hospitality people that chose to be zombie traders will feel the brunt of it. I have no doubt about it. And look, just a quick Google search of, restaurants for lease. I'm outstanded how many restaurants there are for lease, fully equipped. And, you can get them for nothing. And my heart goes out to those people. That was somebody's dreams. But, some of them are true victims to our industry. And quite honestly, some of them probably needed to move out of our industry, to be brutal about it. But, yes, I think there's a lot more to happen within our industry that is not going to be nice for a lot of people.
Adam, I love a bit of restaurant nostalgia, and I would love you just to take us back to the days when your father and mother opened Taj Mahal in Chapel Street, Windsor, back in the early 1960s. Can you just paint a little bit of a picture of the restaurant scene in those days?
Oh, well, I'll first tell you about the restaurant a little bit. I grew up to Jumping Jack Flash being played by the sitar through a reel-to-reel sound system,
Oh, my God, I love it.
Yeah, and we had the laminated tabletops, and, my mother would come out in a caftan and it was a very different industry back then. People were smoking in restaurants, and it was very simple food. We had our Aussie meal section, which I often wonder how the hell did my mum know how to cook an Aussie meal, but, fish fingers wasn't that hard. But having an Indian restaurant in Melbourne back then was quite radical, so much so that, I remember our garden being filled with herbs because we couldn't buy it. I remember staying in a greengrocer and my father trying to explain to the man what coriander was. We've come a long, long way, from all levels of our industry. I can go through every decade and tell you what meat sold the best and what wine sold. I mean, who would have thought there was a time when people loved Benin Moselle? It was one of the primo wines, a Mateus Rosé. Today we've just got so much more mature and better. Oh, my God, when cask wine came out, that was I remember reconfiguring our bar to manage cask wine and us having to search for carafes,
Wow.
where you buy them from. Takeaway containers didn't so much exist. People used to bring their old containers to the restaurant or their pots and we'd put the food in their container or pot, so they could take it home. We've come a long, long way, and things have changed. Chapel Street, Windsor back then in the 60s was the most happening place, and South Yarra was all industrial. But, of course, that all flipped right through the 80s and 90s where Windsor became sort of the lower end and South Yarra became the busier end, and now we're seeing that flip again over to Windsor, and that's what I mean. Our industry, we always revert back to where we're at somehow. There's like a big, circle that we travel. But, I grew up with the likes of Shirley Bassey coming into, a lot of the people listening wouldn't even know her, would come into the restaurant, who was an icon, and go and have to use the one toilet we had in the venue, which was outdoors. And she was a very elegant woman, iconic. And I can go through a list of celebrities that over the years we looked after. So literally I was born, crawling on the floors of restaurants, and subsequently my kids have actually been born in the restaurants. So we go a long, long, long way back. But of course, my memories perhaps in the 80s was a very different area where you had restaurants like Glow's, Fanny's, Two Faces, Marchetti's Lantern, Stephanie's, Mietero's.
Yeah. So really glamorous restaurants and really, real places to be in Melbourne at the time. Yeah.
They were. And it's unfortunate that level of dining experiences somewhat died in our industry now. In those days, people would sit and do 3 courses and enjoy the evening. But of course, that doesn't so much exist today. Well, not in many places anyway. And where have all those restaurateurs gone? They've all gone. They were iconic. They were all iconic, and they've all gone. So.
I think some of the things that I think of with those restaurants, and not that I was, not that I went to them, went to Stephanie's and Mietta's, I think, but didn't have the privilege of going to the others. But one thing that makes me sad is that you think about the skills of the service staff, and just that, filleting fish at tables and flambeing, like some of that restaurant theatre that we don't really see much anymore.
Look, when I tell my kids I used to waiter in a dinner jacket, a bow tie and a cummerbund, they look at me and scratch their head. Imagine if I did that today. People think I was mad. But, you had to do an apprenticeship for waitering back then.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And if my memory serves me right, it was 3 years or 4 years, an apprenticeship.
Wow.
And, we were taught tableside cooking, brigade service, silver service, cocktail making, everything, and was considered an art.
Tell me something that you learnt about silver service. Like, what was something that you were really good at?
I was never good at it.
What were some people good at?
In terms of that level of service?
Yeah.
I always enjoyed being the maitre d', which is not a term used today either, which was to go and greet people, speak to them, upsell them. I'd bring out the trolley with the liqueurs and upsell them for a liqueur or a port or a cognac or whatever. I very much enjoyed that. The silver service aspect and brigade service, which probably very few people have seen today.
Well, explain what that is.
Well, where you have almost a group of marching waiters, waitresses that would be in a brigade of 10, depending on the size of the event. I remember doing brigade service with white gloves, and you would literally, in one line, march into the kitchen. Each one of you would grab one plate. You would march out together, back to back. All stand behind your prospective client, and like a well-choreographed dance, you would put that dish in front of the customer and then place it down on the table all together. So it was huge theatre. And the same method would be used for clearing tables. You would march out, circle the table, pick up their plate, march off, and so on. So, but those, you're probably thinking, what the hell am I talking about? Because a lot of people haven't seen it. But it was a big part of the game back then. So it doesn't even exist today.
Yeah, I remember going to a 3 Michelin star restaurant in Paris, and I was dining by myself at Le Maurice, just opposite the Louvre. And, I just wanted to have that 3-star benchmark experience for myself. So I knew what all the fuss was about. And I remember someone, like 3 waiters approaching me solo at the table with this, a plate with this enormous silver cloche over the top. And it was that where one person sort of presented the plate, the other one took off the cloche, and I don't even remember what the third person did, but I'm sure they had a very important job.
Yeah, that's brigade service, but look at you remembered it, So,
oh, yeah, it was stunning. Yeah.
So, but look, I mean, we've at a financial level cannot provide that, I'm not brigade service, absolutely not. But, is there room to provide silver service and bring back that theatre? I think there is, mixing drinks at tables. It's not that hard, but I don't know, what market out there or where you'd set up something like that. I mean, you wouldn't. In earlier times, the city would have been the place to set that up, but not today. And I don't think in the near future is the city to do it. So I'm not sure whether there's a place anymore for in our industry at a financial level for that to happen anymore. But do I miss that level of service? Absolutely. Do I miss the theatre of it? Yes. The professionalism of it? Yes. You went to work feeling like proud that you had this ability and this talent, but it just doesn't happen.
I think you definitely lose something. I mean, I think it's always enjoyable to be in the presence of someone who's excellent at what they do, and they display a level of expertise that that demonstrates the training and the commitment and the pride in those tasks. And it doesn't matter whether it's someone making char kway teow on the street in Penang, or it's someone shining shoes, or it's someone changing tires on a Formula One car. Like, I think any time that you see incredible skills displayed, I think it raises everybody up as humans. Really, it's like, look what we can do, and we can all be good at our own different things. I think it is really special, and I think we do lose something without that. But at the same time, you can see why we don't have it. I mean, we're just all like attacking one lamb shoulder on a table that's we're to share between us, and that has its pleasures as well. So that it would be great if there was space for the kind of dining that you're talking about alongside everything else.
I would love to do something like that just for fun, really, just to bring it back. And I've always said to my wife, I'd love to open up an 80s restaurant again, because I think it would be a great experience for people. I was asking my daughter, she loves retro and recycling clothes and whatever. And I said, darling, what's what do they call it? Not retro,
vintage.
Vintage. And I said, is it 60s, 50s? She said, no, Dad, the 90s.
You're right.
And, I'm thinking 90s, but so I thought, bring back the 80s food business here. I mean, it'll blow the young people's minds out. It'll bring a lot of reminiscing to those that enjoyed that time, but who knows, I may do it at some point. I like doing different things within our industry. In our industry, we've had Moroccan, Italian, Indian, modern Australian, under our banner. We've had all kinds of restaurants, but, I enjoy giving those new ideas a good bash. Which I'll continue to do. That 80s restaurant may be one day happening.
Do it, Adam. I'm going to be there.
A little bit of bouillon glaces in the background or something,
Yeah, love it. All right, there's got to be a place for it. Adam, it's been so great to have a catch up, and thank you so much for giving us your perspective and your wisdom from decades of experience. I think it's going to be really inspiring and useful to a lot of people. So thanks for your time.
And very kind of you to invite me on, Dani. Thank you very much. All the best.
Absolute pleasure. Take care. This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about. We spend a week thrashing around each issue, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinenat.deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
This